had a busy agenda this morning.
Yeah.
You should be just fine. Time wise.
Well, you never know.
It's time for Tim to talk.
Are we recording?
We are recording, yes, sir.
Okay, since we are late, I'd like to start the meeting. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm gonna call the Isabel County Board of Commissioners Criminal Justice and County Affairs Committee to order. We're running a little behind schedule, so we will try to move it along. First up, we have approval of the agenda. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No.
Commissioner? Seeing none, we'll move on with the agenda as presented.
Okay. There's any, it didn't, nothing else.
We have a call to the public.
I have something not on the agenda, so I'm gonna
Okay.
pop up here quick. I have a,
Good morning.
good morning. I have a bunch of people setting up the EOC waiting for me, so I wanna just kind of go through this if we can. So if you recall back to all of last year, which was only a few 8 weeks ago, I understand. I brought a proposal to you in regards to the radio tower from the state, the contract and grant that we had. So when we were setting this all up, MPSCS from the state runs the radio side of it, and DTMB, which is their business side of it, said we could be the we being the state, could be the fiduciaries for this project or the county. Talked to Nicole, we opted out of doing it, thinking what just a double bunch of work, right? So we got all these things signed and that notice to proceed. We did on the 19th, I believe, in December, and then the state called me on the 22nd and said, "Oh, we just found out we can't be the fiduciary." Perfect. Like, I'm glad you guys got your stuff together. So a little frustrating. So I come back to Nicole and I said, you know, my opinion, my thought would be the most that we would have to pay out at one time would probably be 2 million, which is a lot. The process, Motorola gives us 45 days turnaround, which I've already talked to them saying that may not be quite enough. So basically how this would proceed with this point, when we get an invoice for widgets and gadgets, I'm going to have them streamline that by an email to us. Bring those, when I get those, run right to Procom and say, are widgets and gadgets on this list in your shops? That's going to be the depot where stuff's going to get dropped. We're going to check those boxes. Yes, that stuff was brought in. I'm going to get it in front of this board as quickly as possible, because we know we have like a 2 to 3 week process through here. And then we have to pay Motorola. We have to get the canceled check from Motorola, turn around and give it to the state through the Sigma system for the reimbursement. So it could be a month to 2 month turnaround. So Nicole seems to think we're good to go as far as fund balances and not causing any problems in that short period of time, but it is a major change in how we were going to pay for this. And again, quite frustrating that, we were led to told one thing and that is not the case. So
We will want to be sure we're in good communication with the treasurer's office about when those major expenses are coming, right? Little onesie twosie stuff, not bad, but if you're starting to spend, $500,000 at a chunk, we need to include them. Cash flow is critical, and they, interest rates are up, so they're actually, investing some funds longer term now. So things are tied up. So just if we can know when it's coming, I know we've got a few years to spend this money.
yeah, so I'm being told this project is a 2-year project. However, this first phase will be the monopole and the generator and all. I mean, so
That'll be some dollars.
the first round is going to be fairly substantial. And then again, trying to streamline this to get, and I'm sure Nicole's office will let me drop this in late if I, we get one or something to that effect and get a process through as fast as we can. I don't know. Money's there.
The money's there, and
We
it
just
was,
had to
it was
change this.
appropriated by the legislature. It would take an act of legislature to
Yeah,
take
it-
the money away, so it's coming. It's just, we're gonna have to front it.
And we've already signed that contract agreement with the state, so they're on the hook for the $4.8 million. It just made more sense to have the state do it versus us, but apparently somebody didn't check all the boxes or something, and that's not the case. So, but I want to bring that up because that's always great news, right?
We'll wait for free money.
Yeah, and that's just it. And it's a great project, but and I'm just assuming because again, we're going to do this in phases, and I've told Motorola we are doing this in phases. We are not doing this all at once. So we will do that tower And then when that tower's up, us as end users are going to go out with our little radios. We're going to key them up, and make sure it works where we think it should work and where it's supposed to work. And then those shortfalls would be phase 2. By the time we'd have phase 1 paid for, and that would be the bidirectional antennas and some things that we may need to put in here or there. Once that phase 2 is done, which is probably those run about 30,000 a piece. You know, if we had to have 2 or 3 of them someplace, we know we might have to put a couple in the Sheffield schools or whatever. And then phase 3 would be buying the radios and portables, and that'll be probably a 1.6. And then there should be some funds left over that we can work on a couple of little things with our partners. So.
Is that already contracted to start?
So we did the
Equipment.
notice to proceed in December. So yes, we're waiting for the kickoff meeting, which I sent an email off to Motorola in the state on the 20th of January saying, hey, it was a bullet train in December. It's crickets in January. What's going on? I got a lot of people like, hey, when we're going to get this thing fixed so it works. I was told there's going to be a kickoff meeting. The PM that's on Mark's project at Dispatch, the $1 million console project, is our PM for this. That's a good thing because he's worked in the field and they've had a good relationship with him. So that's a good thing. But my email to the state and to Motorola on the 20th was, I want a streamlined process prior to the first widget being purchased. I need to know exactly how I'm getting these emails, process with Procom, the process to get it through my board, the process to get it reimbursed as fast as possible. So we're not having issues with cash flow. So
The canceled check is really what holds things up. My
It
God,
does.
even with the USDA, before we even pay a bill to Clark, we can have reimbursement from the USDA just
Now,
based
I
on the
don't know-
invoice. It's amazing.
now I don't know, and that's part of the streamlined conversation I want to have. Is there an opportunity to an electronic transfer to Motorola that shows immediately that they were paid? Because that would step it up substantially, right? Not going to
Again,
check to
that's
corporate
communication
Motorola.
with our treasurer's office.
Yeah.
They do all
So-
those EFTs, so.
And if that's an option, that streamlines a ton of it, right? We don't have to wait for that cancel check and stuff. So that's the meeting I'm kind of pushing, waiting to get on the books with them so I can streamline that. So
Thank you for working so hard.
frustrating. It was just frustrating. So
Well, keep us updated on the timeline.
Yeah, I will, absolutely.
How the, I
absolutely.
know things are so hard to get anything accomplished anymore as far as
Yes.
dates and everything, so.
And when I say $2 million might be the first, it might not be that. It might, because they got stuff on order, so it might be a $50,000 one shows up and then a $25,000 one. I mean, it might be piecemealed in because they're ordering it and when it shows up. If that's the case, it's a lot easier to get that cycle going, but again, the way this is went, they may just say, here's $2 million in equipment.
I'd rather have a piecemeal because.
I would too,
Things
but
get done a little bit once you give them all the money,
yeah,
then they kind of.
we're not giving
slow
it to
walk
them.
it.
We're giving it to them in chunks.
Yeah. Don't pay everything up front, please.
No.
It never ends well because they're just kind of
Yeah, sometimes there's.
go at their own pace.
Yeah.
All right, so that's all I had on that. Thank you.
Okay.
Public comment in a long time.
Yeah, that's a long
I was gonna say, I was watching 3 minutes. I was gonna, but
Okay,
it was,
give me
the
the-
conversation was interesting, so I didn't interrupt you. Really wanted to.
Yeah, you should have.
Sure, my love. 3 minutes and less very interesting.
Oh, no, well, yeah, I know.
I would have just waited till the end and done it again.
Is there statute of limitations on this? I know we've done before. Okay, is there any more public comments in the room? I see none. Is there anybody online or on the phone?
There is not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we will close public comment and move on. And we have the sheriff up considering the approval of Isabel County Sheriff's Office special deputy position to be placed on the non-union employee wage scale as pay grade 10 and adjust the special deputy William Bailey's current pay according to pay grade 10, step 1 year in the amount of $21.86 per hour is effective immediately and provide retroactive payment since the date of hire. Okay, we have it. Let's,
Yeah, so this is this is kind of my lost employee, if you will. So when if you recall back when we wanted some security in the building here, we used some of the ARPA funds, we brought Will in and did a great job.
We never used ARPA funds, by the way.
What's that?
We never
Oh,
used ARPA
okay,
funds for
alright.
that. I just want a point of clarification. It was talked about at the time. It was approved to do it, but we decided.
Perfect. I thought that was coming out of ARPA funds, so.
never did.
When is things change, COVID, so forth, whatever, determined that it wasn't necessarily need. Fortunately, Beal City Schools had gotten a grant from the tribe for a school resource officer. Thought that'd be a good fit for him. He was up for that challenge. He went to the school. We were working on an agreement there when the state come out with a school resource officer grant opportunities for the schools. Beal City wrote one and was successful. So now we're in the process of locking in our agreement that we'll bring to this board as far as reimbursements and so forth. So currently right now, Beal City was paying about 3/4 of his salary. And then we were picking up the other in one of our open positions that we had. This will allow us to hire that last open position or last couple open positions back to the road. However, as thinking about it, he had not received any increase, any COLAs, nothing since he started in the county building under that special assignment. And he has not received anything as he's been in the school. His workload, responsibility, liability, everything has went up. He's responsible for an entire building of K through 12 kids and teachers and staff and everybody else. He's putting on presentations. We're sending some trainings. He's working on their building safety and security. He's working with Mark on security things with all the schools. So he's gotten really busy. So as we start to look at this, and then I didn't realize he hadn't gotten his COLAs either. I was just going to jump him up a couple dollars, but Nicole had mentioned that maybe we should put him on the pay scale. So it's the right thing. He gets the COLAs, he gets the pay and step increases, which is absolutely correct. So
We can
what you see,
budget for it.
budget for, yep. So what's in front of you is that step that we have for a grade 10, I believe it was.
Non-union
Non-union.
because of that special deputy
Yeah, because
status.
of special deputy status, so he's not a union member. They're under the contract, we can use special deputies for certain things, so. So other than that, just looking to bring him up to the wage that he should be at. I would like to see him get compensated for what he should have gotten from as being a full-time employee through the COLAs and awards over the last year and a half, 2 years it's been here, so. And that's something that I don't have a number for. That would be a Nicole and her staff question to know what that number is, but I can't believe it's huge, but
Back to August 22nd.
Yes, it would be August 3rd of 2021.
Yeah.
But actually, it wouldn't go back that far because he started
yeah, it'd be
4 cents higher or something like that than the grade 10 was at the time. So we would not start it then. Yeah, good point. Where would you go back to retro? January 1 of 22. Yeah, that's what you would do because his 2% would have kicked in, getting him over the $20 that he was at. So if you're interested in approving retro, regardless of the cost, because you know, separate things, right? I would go back to January 1 of 2022. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't. Things I like about it, one is it's not gonna cost more money, and then there's just working with the school systems. I think it's just a good idea to get those relationships, so.
and there's no, I'm not asking for any general fund adjustments or anything. We have money in our budget. We're still short staffed, so that's not an issue at all. Going forward, the school's paying his salary, so we're not coming out of any of our tax dollars either. So it's kind of a win on our end as far as having him there for sure, and then the school being able to support his salary and stuff. So.
We really enjoyed having him here, but talk about highest and best use.
Yeah.
That's where he should be. That's
We've sent him to some schools. He's like I said, he's already done a bunch of education stuff with the kids there at Beal and some other things in Wademan, but it's nice having him out there if there was an emergency at Wademan or something or anything that he's able to go, and he seems to fit in pretty good. He's just, they haven't had a SRO out there for quite a while, so it's a learning thing, what teachers want what and what administrators want what wills, they sometimes, I know when I was in the schools heavily, they sometimes wanted us for disciplines. We kind of had to separate, no, that's disciplines of school. We do this side of it, will help you. So they're working through all that right now, but so far so good and everybody seems to be pretty happy, so.
Okay, I don't have any more questions.
All right.
Commissioner.
Nope. I don't. I'll make a motion, move to move forward the consideration approving the Isabella County Sheriff's Office special duty position to be placed on a non-union employee wage scale as a grade 10 and adjust Special Deputy Williams Bailey's current pay according to pay grade 10, step 1 here in the amount of 21.86 per hour effective immediately and retroactive payment date of hire.
I will support that. Is there any more discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the same. The motion has passed and we will move this forward to the work session.
Thanks,
Thank
gentlemen, I
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Have a
Well, nice done.
I go learn about detentions. So,
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks, sir.
okay, next up, we have post-construction sound study discussion. Yep, Tim Newport here to go through the study, which is looks quite extensive.
It is. Okay, so I went through this this morning with the other committee, and I will try to walk back through it in a little more expedited fashion, since I think some of you heard a little bit of it.
Yeah, part of it, so.
So this is the post-construction sound study to back ourselves up. The post-construction sound study is something that's required by the zoning ordinance in Article 12, Section 1205, QQ 28. Requires a turbine project to go through that post-construction sound study. When we initially look at a project for wind, we get modeling to ensure that it complies. Post-construction sound study gives us the actual data that proves their model was in compliance and that the turbines in the project is in compliance. The standard for noise in the ordinance is same Article 12, Section 1205 QQ 16, which is a 50 decibel L50 reading. I'm going to start out in the document right with the executive summary, which is on page 1. In the executive summary, it talks about this project and its size being 136 turbines in size with a capacity of 383 megawatts of power. Commercial operations was in June of 21. RSG Resource Systems Group was retained by us to perform the post-construction sound study. So the ordinance in that QQ 28 section of Article 12 requires that the study be done independently of the applicant or owner and done by us, Isabella County. Planning Commission selects the sound consultant, and then we set the parameters as community development for what we're looking for in a post-construction sound study. They did a total of 14 sites, we selected a total of 14 sites for sound monitoring. We did both attended and unattended monitoring. The attended monitoring was done on 5 different dates, and over 3 other periods of time, we did unattended monitoring. There's a total of 113 shutdowns total. Shutdowns were for the purpose of collecting ambient, because remember, we're looking at a decibel level of the turbine only, not total noise out there. The very last sentence of that executive summary states that the results of this sound monitoring indicate the project sound levels at each site were below the 50 decibel L50 limit. That tells us that the turbines are in compliance with the county's ordinance. I'm going to jump us ahead a couple of pages. There's a bunch of other information in here, introduction and such, but if you jump to page 13 under results, you will see page 13 results. You'll see a table at the bottom. The very sentence right above table 1 reads, as shown in the last column of table 3, the highest measured L50 is 49 dBA at site 5. The next highest measured L50 is a 48 dBA measured at site 6 and 12. So those were our worst case scenarios of the 14 sites we selected. Table 1 shows our monitoring periods, obviously shows the dates in which they were done, shows the times in which they were collected. shows a column with unattended versus attended. The very top, what is that, 10 or so rows there are all attended data. It shows the sites that were attended on those dates. And it shows in the very last column, the sites of valid data. So did they collect enough data to be able to make a determination? In all of the attended data, we only collected on Thursday, April 21st. Site 1 was the only one through the attended process. Most of that had to do with good old Mother Nature, who does what she wants when she wants. So they flew in, they came, they sat. We had security in place. We had the sheriff's department, 911, knowing that somebody's in a location, there's a vehicle on the side of the road, there's monitors up. And the weather just didn't cooperate with us to get us there.
Probably had a lot of farming going on during that.
Yeah,
time, too.
both times late in the year, we were worried about, stuff coming
Tractor
off. Yep.
noises, Yep, I
Yep.
can see that happening.
Especially
with the air planners, they make a lot of noise.
Yep. So we went to this unattended data, which we were allowed to collect. And the unattended data was basically same data source, just nobody sitting there documenting anomalies. They had to work anomalies out of the data after they received it. They were set up for longer periods of time. So it was battery life on these things. It was like 10 or 12 days. So they could set that thing out in the field and they could sit there and collect data. We still had to monitor the weather on those days because when we had good winds and things, we needed to get shutdowns in there so that we could get that ambient out at that time. So we were constantly on a daily basis, we'd receive an email that would tell us, let DTE know we're going to be shut down in these periods. We'd send that over to DTE. DTE would shut down at those exact times and then turn back on at the time that was requested. So as you can see, we had 3 different periods in which we had unattended, and most of our data collection happened in those times. So if you flip over to the next page, page 14, monitoring locations that are affected, monitoring locations that affected turbines. This is something that when we've gotten questions about this, it was most people don't understand. We selected sites. We didn't select a specific turbine. So it's not a 14. We didn't test 14 turbines. We tested 14 sites that were selected from a group of 52 of the worst case scenario modeled sites. And then we used some other parameters to select these 14 sites. The last column in this table, table 2, for example, on turbine 5, which was the highest 49 dBA, worst turbine for noise, or worst site for noise, we had 14 turbines impacting that noise. So it just wasn't one, it was that site up against that non-participating property owner's property line that we ended up at 49 dB, but there was 14 turbines in and around the surrounding area that were impacting it. So these are showing the parcels and these lat longs in decimal degrees where the equipment was set up at. Table 3, the very last column of table 3. Table 3 is a monitoring result. The highest hourly L50, that's the number that we're looking for compliance. So that L50 had to be at 50 dB. And all of those numbers through 1 through 14 sites are all below that. You can see site 5 was at the 49, like indicated above. And I think it was 12 and 6 that were at 48 dB. This shows the number of shutdowns that occurred. You can see on site 2, for example, under number of shutdowns, we only had 3 attended shutdowns because weather wasn't cooperating as much. But on the unattended side, we ended up with 63 shutdowns. So they shut down for 15-minute increments, 63 different times during the unattended so that we could collect good data there. Again, this last column basically shows compliance with the ordinance as stated in the executive summary above. Just lost my what's page here. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump you into page 16. Next page, which is the conclusion. The conclusion is, these measurements were made at 14 sites selected by representative of the worst case impacts at non-participating property lines. When the project wind turbines operated at or near the highest sound emissions, the average L50 ranged from 39 to 49. The highest project only sound levels measured at these sites ranged from 44 to 49 dBA L50, again, in compliance. The averaging, I don't want that to get anybody to get confused by when it's using the averaging. So the averaging was of the good data they got. So at site 2, if they got 3 sets of good, valid, collectible data, they averaged those 3s, but each one of them got their own dBA, and the highest one is the one that we were most concerned about, not the average, because you could potentially pull that down under a number. But in none of the cases, averaging or actual highest, did we come outside of compliance with the ordinance at 50 dB.
It's like a really fun formula on the next page there.
Yeah, I try to steer away from the acoustic glossary, because that's for some guy that is much smarter in the sound acoustic
goodness.
engineering world than I. But they did include a glossary in the next few pages of Appendix A. But I'm gonna have you turn 3 pages back to Appendix B, which is monitoring site descriptions and results. Which is these tables here. You can get to any one of them. I'm sorry, I said back, I meant
Oh,
forward.
forward.
Sorry,
Okay.
Frank.
No,
I think you're tracking the wrong way.
tracking the wrong way.
Yeah, coming up right here. Yep. So in Appendix B, this is monitoring site descriptions and results. This is 14 sites. You'll see the exact same study. It's about 3 pages. Each one of them is about 3 pages long. It's set up the exact same way for each one of the sites. This one just happens to be site 1, and we go right through the 14. What this shows is the worst case scenario. Tells us how far the monitoring equipment was set up from the nearest turbine, which was 1,050 feet in that first paragraph. Second paragraph tells us when we did the monitoring, what type of monitoring it was. And the very last sentence, which is the same through each one of these 14 sites, the turbine only sound level for this period was 46 dBA L50, which is below the threshold of 50 dBA L50. Now, they're not all 46, they're all what each site picked up, but that sentence is the same in all of them, which again shows us compliance. The table or the graph is a little more complex. It's easily understood if you have 3 weeks to look at it, which we don't, but I'll go through it quickly. At the top, there's two different legends at the top. One of them is overall period sound levels, and the other one is exclusions. On the left-hand side, the overall period sound levels shows us a solid line as an L50 1 minute. It shows us a dashed line as an L50 1 minute excluded. It shows us a background in orange L50. That's an hourly reading. It shows a turbine plus background L50 at 1 hour, and it shows a turbine only at 1 hour. As you can see, the turbine only 1 hours and the background period at L50 are all straight lines. Purpose of that is we collected 2 data points over an hour, one at this beginning of this hour, one at the beginning of this hour. You connect 2 points, it's going to be a straight line. The other line where we did it by the minute, which is what we were after to be able to collect this L50, was 1 every minute. So we have 60 data points over that same hour. So obviously you see more data points, you're going to see more ups and downs and more roller coaster of a ride. The exclusions, if you look way up at the top of the graph, there's a bunch of red dots to the left at the very top. That is exclusions for wind gusts. So where they excluded data, you'll see the dashed L50 below, because they didn't use that data for collecting it because it was skewed by wind gusts. And so they excluded for wind gusts, anomalies, and precipitation. In this case, all of the wind gusts in the collection period while the turbine was running were from wind gusts. There was a couple anomalies, I believe, collected. Oh no, there was a couple anomalies collected in both sessions. The shutdown, which is that orangish colored area, that 15-minute period, or longer than 15-minute period. What is it? That's an hour period as well, I believe. But the big thing to look at is on the left-hand column is the 50 dB level. If you take that line and you draw it across, none of your measurements at the 1 minute ended up being up and above. There could be in an L50 a measurement that gusts and winds do get up above, and it kicks up above the L50, but those are exceptions that are within the ordinance. For wind gusts, you can go up higher than the 50 dB. We see them as quick bursts and gusts, or major storm event rolls in quickly, and that could happen. But in the study side of things, we didn't see any of that. Everything that was collected was below. So Appendix B shows this for every single site. The next page shows you the monitoring equipment as it was set up and the nearest turbine. And then the next page shows you the location over some orthophotography that identifies the turbine itself and the site, which is typically on the property line of a non-participator, because that's where the 50 decibel level requirement comes in. So that is the same for site 2, 3, 4, 5, right through this, and you can look at them yourselves individually. Every one of those are in compliance with the ordinance requirements. So I'm going to jump us back a little ways in the document now to Appendix C. And there's page, they numbered the page numbers B and C first, so we're looking for C1 to start Appendix C. So Appendix C now is a tabular data set of detailed sound monitor results for valid periods. We looked at some of the valid periods. Site 1 only had one valid period, so you're going to only see one page of report. Site 2 had multiple, so you're seeing one for each one of those valid periods. So this section is quite a bit bigger than the rest of the document is, because this is all the periods showing compliance. They only graphed in Appendix B the worst case of each one of those events or those valid data periods for each site. So when looking at this data in Appendix C, you're looking at power output. We had to have the turbine have a certain level of wind at the turbine itself up at the hub. You had to have a certain level of wind below a certain level of wind at the monitor itself that was on the ground at set up at 5 feet high. And then the turbine itself had to be running at as close to maximum power as possible, so that we can ensure we're getting the greatest noise. So DTE had to provide us with all their power curves and their power outputs during those same periods that we were running and shutting down and so on, so that we could verify the correlation between turbine running at full speed versus turbine running at half speed, giving us this number. So you see output levels. The green areas are the valid area where we collected valid data. I say we, where they collected valid data. I didn't do any of this. The next table below that is the wind speeds. And as you can see, in the same time periods that it's green above where we had valid data, we had high winds at 13, 12 meters per second. So giving us pretty good winds up at the hub. The results box at the bottom on the left-hand side gives the same time periods, tells us what our ground wind speed was to ensure we had good ground wind speed, tells us what our maximum gusts were. It tells us how many valid minutes we had at each one of those 10-minute intervals. And then it shows us that period. The very last column again, the valid period. And then the very last column again shows us our turbine L50 number that we're looking for. And as you can see down that row, there is no turbine levels over the 50 dBs of the county's requirement. To the right-hand side, there's a little box there. This kind of gives us some information in red. Turbine only sound level is 46 dBA for 35 minutes. So each one of these are going to have that same box telling us that number. And we needed to ensure that that was under that 50 dB L50 number that we were required by ordinance to have. They did certify each one of these to as a certification form of their own, that this was not done, with, our doing or DTE's doing. This is done independent of us, because in the event that we have complaints or we have challenges to this, this is the document that would be, moved through the court system and would have to be challenged by somebody if they were to challenge us. So section.
I don't know if you said it this time, but something helpful you said in the other committee was that there's magnitude, like to go from
Oh, yeah.
49
Yeah.
decibels to 50 is not a magnitude of 1.
Right.
I
right.
guess I want
Yeah. So when you look at 49 dB in that one turbine, site 5, which had 14 turbines contributing, to move from one, and I don't know the mathematics to it, but the way it was explained to me was to move from 1 decibel of decibel 48 up to a decibel of 49. It's an exponential function. So there's many factors that move it in an exponential factor. So it's not just as simple as, we're reading 48, and we look at our meter and it goes, oh, we're at 49 now. There's many factors that compile that together that move us through this exponential function to get us to a 49. So it's not as close when you look at a 49 to a 48. There's much more distance between those two thresholds. It is important to get that out, definitely. So in Appendix C, which is most of this document, you'll see all of those data points and all of that valid data time that was collected. The last thing that I'll point out is Appendix D. Appendix D is all the meteorological data that was provided from the collection at both the ground and the hub during the time of collection. So what were the temps? Temps had to be above 0 degrees. What was, was there precipitation? What were the winds? What was, I don't know the other factors in there, temps, humidity, certain wind speed at 10 meters per second and such. So the meteorological data, basically that gave them the ability to say, yep, meteorological data is good. Yep, data was collected, turbines running, winds are at the proper speeds. Here is the data. They do the analysis on the data, and the end result is that both in the executive summary, the conclusion, the results, and all of the appendixes, that this does comply with the county's ordinance. So I know that's a ton of information. As I said to committee earlier, I could talk for 3 hours probably about it. I'm more than willing to take any questions you have now. I'll take questions after, if you get home, you start reading through this thing and you got questions, give me a call and we can kind of talk about them. I'm not a sound expert by any means. I didn't sleep at a Holiday Inn Express or a Super 8 or whatever that commercial says, but I can get the answer if I don't know the answer for you within the document. But we are extremely confident that that the park is in operating in compliance with regard to sound.
Go ahead. I'm looking.
So I've got questions on what was the thought process, or do you know the thought process of picking a single point of the year to do sound studies? I know that temperature, well, temperature is a major product. So sound travels further and more easily for in cold temperatures.
So the idea behind it early on was, one, we left that to the sound consultants, right? They're going to provide us with the best information. But again, knowing some of this myself, leaf off, early spring and late fall, obviously we're going to have leaf off. You're not going to have that stuff bouncing around, right? So those were the periods of time that we went for. We had to get those in periods of time when we felt like the winds were going to be the highest. Summertime isn't an optimal time for winds either. The winds die down through the summertime. Typically the winds are a little higher in the night times. So the sound consultant really moved us through that with our consultant expert with Spicer, who's been through several of these to determine that. We had discussions about it. We selected the times. We did do an unattended monitoring activity late June and July, but we were up against the 12-month requirement within our ordinance. We said we got to give this at least one more shot and one more chance to get and collect data. We didn't get it. We put ourselves off until November. When November came, we got into farming season, pulling stuff off. We said, well, we're going to have this to contend with. We got to do this in a way. And there was some communications with this site-specific locations where we dealt with the landowner, DTE, and or us. And or the consultant would speak with the landowner to see have they already pulled crops off? Are they going to be running in that location? Obviously, the closer you are, the more sound's going to be there. But yeah, sound can travel long distances.
Right.
Most of them look like when they set up their sound system, it's a single windmill. Are there ones where it's taken in two because some of them are closer together?
Yeah, that table.
I was kind of looking.
Yeah,
for
there's some
it.
sites that
Because some of the complaints I hear most
14
often, it's just one
turbines.
windmill's making all the noise, and it's like, yeah.
It is about page 15 or so.
I can look through the data. I guess if you
Yeah.
tell me what it is, I could.
Yeah, this table right here, it is on page 14. I'll reach for my glasses around my head. So this tells you by site, and then the last column affecting wind turbines.
Okay.
So the monitoring location is this lat long on that property, and these were the list of turbines that impacted
Okay.
that monitoring location. So
That's what I was, yeah.
Site 5 had 14 turbines providing some noise to that
Affecting that
monitor,
site.
affecting that site,
Okay.
correct?
Okay, that's my question.
And sites were chosen under what
Yes.
parameters?
So the sites were selected in worst case by taking a look at the project as a whole when it was modeled. And we said, how close in proximity are we to a non-participator with our modeled maximum sound level? We ended up with 52 of those. Those 52 then were dwindled down to 14. How we selected the 14 were, again, location based. Is it surrounded by woods? Well, we're not going to collect good data there. We got to get to a place that's a little more open and flat. We wanted to make sure that we were collecting data in locations that was away from reflective buildings where the sound was going to bounce off it and we were going to get some crazy reverberation noises. We wanted to make sure that we were relatively flat and level, which the entire park is pretty flat and level. We wanted to make sure that the property owner understood and knew. We wanted good representation throughout the entire project, that all of them weren't clustered into one area. So if you look, there's a map in here, I believe on page about 4, it shows you, yes, page 4. It shows you a map of the whole park, where all the turbines are, and then the sites that we selected. And it was pretty good representation of all of the townships and a pretty good representation of the entire park. Because we knew spending the kind of money it costs to do one of these things, which was not taxpayer dollars that went into it. This was the applicant laying money into escrow, but it was $150,000+ just to get through these 14 sites. We couldn't study the whole thing, but you study a sample of it. You've got a model. Does the model work? We studied that 10% sample at 14 sites for 136 turbines, and they were pretty good representation of the entire park.
Any more questions? Well, thank you for the time, and I'm sure this will be interesting looking at, but
Yeah, it's a lot of information. Like I said, feel free to get through it. When you do, if you have questions, let me know. This does kind of wind our project down. For us, we've got all of our, this is the last thing we were basically waiting on to be able to close this project up from all of the permits and conditions that were imposed by permit, planning commission or ordinance. So if you have other questions, just let me know.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, you're welcome.
good enough. Thank you. With that, I'll move on. Is there any announcements anyone would like to make? None here, so one last call to the public. Is there anybody who would like to make a public comment at this time? I do not see any. Is there anybody online?
There is not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, at that time, I'll close the call the public, and I will call the meeting adjourned at, was it 9:59?
I don't know, I got 10 on my
Good thing.
computer.